Hi, my name's Chris Hill. We're here doing a feature with Ricky today. I've brought you to one of my favourite venues. We're at Earlswood Lakes. It's near Solihull, not far off the M42. And we're here to do a bit of bream fishing. The tackle for today, as you can see in the background, conditions are nice. We've got a lovely gentle breeze, nothing serious, and we've set up two lines today. We've got one line at 27 metres and we've got another line at 45 metres. On the short line we've got an 11-foot Sensas 300. With that we've got a small Shimano Aero Match reel. That's loaded with 0.10 braid. We've got a shock leader on there which is £10. This one is actually a fluorocarbon that I'm just trying out as a shock leader. We've got an 1.5 ounce tipping because conditions are quite calm. We're not going to get a massive amount of tow. We might get a bit, but nothing major. I'll just go through the rig with you. And what we've got on the short line, we've got a free running paternoster. So we've got a link which is just under 2 inches. We're choosing to use a plastic cage because we're only fishing short. These fly up to the surface really quick. You can skim them across the surface quite easily. That's a 20-gram feeder. As I explained, conditions are really perfect, gentle breeze, nothing major. After that, we've got a small number 8 stot. Now, a lot of people use all sorts of things to use, beads and rubbers, float rubbers. I actually prefer a stot. I think it's a lot neater. It kicks the twizzled loop, as I'll explain, out, away from the feeder, as you can see. So through flight, there's nothing getting tangled up around that feeder. After the stot, we've got a little 4-inch twizzled boom, as a lot of you will already know. That is there to prevent tangles. And after that, we've got a 70 centimetre hook length, which is 0.19 and through to a size 12 microbarbed. Right, we'll quickly run you through some bait. We've got 2 bags of ground bait, we've got some Method Mix, and we've got some Crazy Bait Gold. A very high protein fish meal mix. It's high in little bits of particles in this Method Mix. It gives them fish plenty of things to root around with. It's got a lovely green texture to it. It just takes the edge off. That's the Crazy Bait Gold Green. We've got some sweet corn. We've got some little micro pellets. These have been flavoured, Activate flavour, a flavour that I have found that bream absolutely adore. We've got some good old faithful dead reds. Can't go bream fishing without those. Some red worms for the hook. Knocked up a few floating maggots just in case. And for feeding, we've got some dendrobinas, some live maggots, and we've already chopped up some worms, good to go. Chopped up about 250ml pot of worms. We're going to start on the shorter line, which is the 27 metre line. We've fed 3 feeder loads on that line. It's a line, especially at this venue, that I find you can catch some early fish on quick, but you can't stay on it all day. And the one thing it does do is allows you to put plenty of bait in on the long line, catch them early fish quick, and then once it's died, have a look long, and if the long line is good, then you can come back, set that short line up for later on in the match, maybe the last hour or so. So we've fed 3 feeder loads on that line, and we've put no worms in on that line. Now, sometimes worms can kill a peg, so what I normally decide to do is only feed maggots and casters, maybe trickle in a little bit of corn and micros. We're looking to try and catch straight away on this line as soon as we can, so we don't want to put too much stuff in. If it's solid, then you can refeed it and just catch them, but for now, we'll start on 3 dead reds. And we're going to just put 10 to 15 maggots in. A little bit of corn. And a little touch of micros. We're on the slightly smaller 4-hole feeder on this line. Hopefully, after a good 10 minutes or so, it's been allowed to settle, we can catch one. There we go. That's second chuck on that short line. First chuck we had an indication, never got a fish. Started on 3 or 4 dead reds, and that's first chuck on half a piece of dendrobina, tipped with a red worm. And we've got one. It's a good fish. Perfect start in a match situation. We'll pop him back. We'll get back out there. Right, so we've had that fish, second chuck. First chuck I said we had an indication, and then that second chuck we had 2 or 3 good liners just before we got the pull. So there's obviously some fish there. like I explained earlier, we could actually end up just sitting on this line and bagging. What tends to happen is you get a couple of quick fish and it allows you to rest that long line. So first chuck I started on 3 dead reds. Had an indication but didn't get a fish. And then the second chuck, remembering we've not fed no worms on that line to start with, we wanted to try and introduce them as we go if we stay on that line. We tried half a piece of Dendrobina worm tipped with a red Maggie and got some signs, got some indications and got a bite. Now that could be because it's quite a big bait and it stood out from the rest, or there's actually quite a few fish there competing. So we've gone in next chuck, exactly the same. We've just had an indication now. And what I'll do is if I get another couple indications and don't get a bite within 3 or 4 minutes, I'll just move the hook bait just to try and entice a bite. Leave it for maybe another minute, and then if we don't get one, we'll come back in. What I might do then is introduce a feed a load of worms, again with another half Dendrobina. See if there's still fish in the peg, see if you still get activity, some signs, liners, always looking, trying to work out what's in your peg. We've already fed that long line, 10 big baits up, so there's plenty of food out there. It's all about just trying to get that good start, catch them few early fish and setting up your day. Right, so we've had them 2 in 2 chucks. We've had some liners, we've had some signs and indications on the last chuck, and it hasn't gone round. So that was the first chuck we introduced some worms. So what I'll do is I'll introduce a few worms again. I'm going to switch hook baits to 2 halves of red worms and introducing more worm again, as I said. And if I don't get a bite on this chuck, then I'll go back to just feeding maggots, micros, because maybe they don't want a load of worms piling in you. And this is the good thing about not blowing your peg at the start and putting loads of worms in on that line. I mean, it might just maybe be that they want it introduced little and often, or maybe even not at all. So we'll just go out, repeat the process, put it down. Had a quick hook bait change and see if that brings a bite. If it doesn't, like I said, what I'll do is next cast is I won't put any worms in. So we've got a liner straight away, and there you go. So I don't think the last chuck was anything to do with the fact we put some worms in. So that just goes to show how that change works. Just changed hook bait onto two red worms, tipped with a red Maggie. That was a quick bite. One thing that has become apparent is that putting the worms in hasn't affected it in any way. If anything, there's a lot more signs, getting plenty of liners, indications before you get a bite, so it's become apparent that it's been an instant fix. So once, what I think we'll do is before we go on that long line, is when we come to top this line up to set it up for later, is we'll put quite a lot of worm in on this line. Another good fish. There's number 3. Let's pop him back. We're just going to start that topping up process on that short line. One thing I would advise, personally myself, something I do, is I wouldn't let the feeder land to the bottom in case there are some fish there. It's important to let them settle. Also want to create a bit of a spread. Don't want breams all sat on top of like a bin lid, so it's basically just chuck it out. It's about 9 foot deep, so I would count to 2. So 1, 2, and then shake that feeder out. And what that'll do is it'll give you a better spread, and you can top up without the feeder crashing down on top of the bream's head if there are any there. So if you was to go on that long line and it wouldn't produce and you need to come back shore because that's where you was catching, you've topped up your peg, you haven't spooked any fish that are actually down there still grazing, and you've allowed that bait to fall through the water level, and it'll give a better spread and keep the fish picking around. We're fishing at 45 metres, as we said. Now, if conditions were to change and it was to get a bit rougher, wind was to get up maybe, we've got a rod and a reel to do the job. It's perfectly adequate to do it in these calmer conditions. So we've got a 12 foot Sensas 500 black arrow. Again, we've got an 1.5 ounce tipping. We can change. I've got another rod set up to do that job if we have to with 2 ounce tipping. That wouldn't be a problem. The only difference with this setup is we've got a bigger reel. So we've got a TDR distance, which is again loaded with 0.10 braid. We've got a 12-pound shock leader on here. And we have a paternoster set up this time, a fixed paternoster. Now, I'll never say that any rig is 100% tangle proof, but I've used a lot of rigs in my time through bream fishing, and if I can settle on one that I think is as close to 100%, this is the one. So we've got 2 sliding rubbers, float stops. We've got a quick change swivel, which is then tied to a 4-inch loop, which creates your boom section. That then in turn is connected to a link swivel. And then you've got a 4-hole plastic cage. Again, we can change feeders, chop and change, mooch about. If we need to put more bait in, maybe switch to a winder feeder, less bait, a smaller cage feeder. But today we're starting on a 5-hole cage. We've let that long line settle. So there might be plenty of fish out there when we get on there. They might want lots of bait. We get plenty of bait in there. Onto the hook length. Again, it's the same. We've got a 0.19 hook length. This hook length is 100 centimetres in length. And again, we're connected to a size 12 micro barbed hook. For any of you that are interested, the hooks that I am using today are the Sensas Feeder Tech 3180s. These are size 10s, these ones. We use the 10s for big baits. 12s we're going to start on maybe little bits of redworm, maggots, etc. But if we have to change to a bigger hook, maybe use big dendies if small fish become a problem, then we will do later in the session. Right, so it's time to go on that long line. We've learnt off that short line, not forgetting that we didn't put any worms in at the start on that line, and yet feeding some worms definitely triggered fish into feeding, and that red worms were definitely the right up bait. So with that learned, we're going to start on 2 red worms on the hook. We've not put a massive feeder on. We've started off with a 4-hole feeder because we did feed that line heavy at the start with 10 feeder loads. And what we'll do is we'll just put a bit of worm in, a few dead reds, and some micros. And hopefully this long line is solid. Right, so we've got one. We just switched over to a bigger bait, 2 half pieces of dendrobina, as we felt there was some smaller fish in the peg, just to give them bream a chance to find the hook bait. And it's resulted in a fish straight away. Oh, nice fish as well. There we go. We're just changing the hook bait to a bigger, tougher bait, giving them bream enough time to find the hook bait. Has resulted in one. Let's pop her back and try and get another one. Someone's got that, ain't he? Look at him. Right, so we've got another one. That's on the 2 big half pieces of dendrobina again. That's next chuck. One thing I did notice, especially on the last 2 chucks when we've gone in, weather's got really hot now, and I've felt 2 fish on the way down as the feeder's falling. But I think what we'll try and do is we'll get this one in, we'll stick with the 100 centimetre hook length, but we'll try floating maggots, because it definitely feels like there's fish there, but they're up in the water, and this can be a deadly way of catching. So we'll pop this one back, we'll get some floating maggots on, and we'll see if we can get a quick one on the drop. And if we don't, we'll just return back to the big hook bait, because it seems like there has some fish landed now on that long line. So we're going to have another go back on that long line. Short line hasn't produced a fish. What we are going to do is we're going to change to a window feeder, and the reason for that is it's becoming quite apparent that the conditions have changed as the sun just goes in, but it's got really hot and the fish have come up in the water, and the window feeder's one way, if you can't catch them up in the water, of pinning your bait to the deck, so you ain't got no excess ground bait all flying off a cage feeder. And then that way it might give you a better chance of getting a bite. With not a lot of ground bait, just a touch, not loads of bait, because you're only trying to catch one now. We'll see if this little change catches a fish. There we go. So the little changes worked. That's first chuck on that window feeder. Not a lot of bait in it, but what it has done is, what bait is in it, it's got it down. It's pinned that bait to the bottom. And it's worked, and that's back on the long line again. So that little spell of letting it rest while we had a quick look on the short line has worked. I think what we'll do is, we've had a great day's fishing, fantastic sport, caught loads of fish. I think we'll make this one the last one of the day, as it's getting a bit warm. There we go. What a fantastic way to end the day. Let's get it back.